so much, Brienne. And they just told us it's recording. Thanks, Brienne. And thank you to BCCIC for this opportunity to co-host. My name is Colleen Hanley, and it truly is an honor to be part of this, to be working with our panel members, and a special shout out to my co-moderator Patrick Nakakoro. Patrick and I joined a board together about 3 months ago, and we haven't had the opportunity actually to talk face to face, nor have we ever worked together before. So this is us figuring out how to co-facilitate in real time. So thank you to all of you for your patience as we work through this process. Part of my responsibilities in the co-hosting is to set just a bit of context for the conversation we're about to jump into, and I'd like to start that triggered by a conversation that the group of us had last week about thinking about how we bring all of you who have just joined us together, and we started thinking about the context of a circle, and then we started thinking about the context of a fire and the night sky and a beautiful moon, and what happens when we're sitting around a fire and the flames are jumping, and we get deep into our own thoughts and are hearing the thoughts of others. So perhaps that's an image that will help you to stay with us and stay focused. I know that's a challenge when you're in the Zoom world. So thank you for joining us. And I also want to extend an invitation to everybody on the call, including all of us sitting around the panel, to open your hearts and open your minds as we have this special opportunity to listen to each other. Our panelists bring an incredibly diverse set of backgrounds, experience, perspectives to this conversation, this question about what a justice-informed engagement might look like and what it might feel like. And so we're hoping that the questions that we're about to ask them will help you focus on the relationships and the values that help you create or massage that pathway that you are on. And just as we begin, I want to share that I live on the lands of the ancestral lands of the Comox peoples. And I've had the opportunity to sit many times with elders who live in this area, and hear them talk about what acknowledging a land actually means. And they have helped me understand that not only are you acknowledging the land, you're acknowledging all the people who have lived on that land and how they have stewarded that land. And they've also encouraged anybody who's offering an acknowledgement of the land to draw a connection between that acknowledgement and what's actually about to happen. And so the connection that I'd like to offer, and I'm going to go around and invite each of the panelists and to do that as well. The connection I'd like to offer is what elders have taught me, the elders in the Comox Valley, and also the elders that I work with in the Maasai community in Maasailand and what's now called Tanzania, that listening and listening deeply is important to conversation. And so I draw that connection for you and hope that's helpful for you as you join us in this discussion. And so now I'd like to invite each of our panelists to offer their connection to the land that they're working on and the people that they work with. And I'll just kind of tap you on the shoulder with your name so that you can have your time, and then we'll move on to the next person. Deanna, might I start with you?
Sure, thanks, Colleen. My name is Diana Pashani. My connection to this land, well, I'm first generation settler. My parents moved here. My maternal ancestors are from Costa Rica, and my paternal ancestors are from Italy. Very strong peasant roots, and that stays with me, and I keep that in mind in the work that I do. So here at CODEV, my colleague Nadia mentioned in the chat that we are on Tsleil-Waututh and Musqueam and Squamish nations, and one thing that we're trying to grapple with now more is what it means to be on this land and doing the work that we do. What relationship do we have with this land and with the peoples to whom this land has been entrusted over thousands of years? And that's something we're just learning and exploring. Are we doing intros for our organizations or merely our connections to?
Please take just a few more seconds to make that connection.
Yeah.
Brianne has posted your full bio in
Oh,
the chat. So if you've got something you'd like to add, that would be awesome, Brianne.
yeah, I'll say that. Well, yes, labor figures prominently in my background. So not only does the region of Latin America is held near and dear to my heart, given my familial and background and my studies, but labor itself is fused with Latin America in this job. So CODEV here it's based in East Van. It's an international solidarity organization that facilitates partnerships between Canadian trade unions and civil society organizations and Latin American trade unions and civil society organizations, with the goal of supporting struggles that are trying to create a better world. We have 24 partners throughout the Americas, Mexico, Central America, the Caribbean. One thing I want to mention, a shout out to Nadia, who taught me that the Guna people of Panama and Colombia call what we refer to as Turtle Island. They call the region Abya-Yala. And I thought that was very I thought that was very meaningful for me to learn. And so I want to share that piece with you that my colleague shared with me.
Thank you so much, Deanne. And Andrea, may I pass the mic to you?
Hello, everyone. Thank you. And I feel really honored to be here with all of you. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm connecting from the ancestral unceded Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish territories, nations. And these territories, as remembering, were taken by force. And their peoples remind us. And I really like what once one elder shared in a sharing with us. It is not, it doesn't, it's not relating to being invited or not being invited. It is related to how good guests are we being in this land. So that really shift the perspective for me. And that's something that I try to reflect every time, and I invite all of us to reflect about that while we have this conversation. I really like the idea of my heart and relaxes my nervous system. So thank you for that. And first, I would like to say that what I'm sharing today here with you all, it comes from a number of nations from the Andes and from the Amazon. And so any mistake articulated is just mine. So just sharing that with you. And a little bit about me. So I'm a Quechua Andean Peruvian woman, and I was invited by the Ashenica and Yine peoples. So these are two nations from the central Amazon in Peru. And this invitation was to work on issues that community members identified as relevant. So we work directly with community members, and we explore about their concerns and their desired futures. And this is in plural, very intentionally. So we have been working together since 2012, first under a master's program, and now in the framework of a PhD in the University of British Columbia. And in this particular project for the PhD, community members want to share and teach to outsiders what for them means, feels, looks like, what in English could be translated as respect. And we are defining in our work, thanks to their knowledges and their sharings, what means intercultural respect as an invitation, a proposition of see differently, this very vast word respect, which varies so much depending who is talking and the context behind it. So thank you very much, BCIC, for this kind invitation. I'm very happy to be here with you.
And thanks so much, Andrea. I really appreciate both the connections that you and Deanne have made with the work that you're doing in other parts of the world and here on Turtle Island and in Canada as well. Catherine, so good to have you with us. May I pass I was going to say the mic, but I'm going to say pass the talking stick since we're around a fire. Over to you.
Well, thank you for that introduction and for everyone's comments. I'm also very grateful to be here today. I live and work on the unceded traditional territories of the Lekwungen people, also known as the Esquimalt, Songhees, and Wasanic nations. And I have great respect for their traditional knowledge and ongoing contributions to the conversation around reconciliation. It means a great deal to me to explore what that actually means. It has to be meaningful, and I recall attending some of the ceremonies around the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in Vancouver a few years ago. And I was very moved by one woman in particular who was in a healing tent. And she welcomed me into her heart in a way that I almost felt I wasn't deserving of. I hold on to that memory when I think about my own work to reconcile the past wrongs with the people who continue to live and contribute to this beautiful land we all live on. And I'm also really grateful for this opportunity to speak as a volunteer member of the Victoria chapter of Canadian Women for Women in Afghanistan. Today, in the 21st century, the Taliban is waging a misogynist war of gender persecution against the women and girls of Afghanistan, barring women and girls from high school and post-secondary education. Dangerous as it may be, these brave women are speaking out bravely against the repressive edicts of this regime. And for me personally, I stand in solidarity with them. It's about embracing our common humanity and my hope for a more just world. So perhaps I'll have more of an opportunity to talk about the work that our chapter is doing for this national organization in the question and answer period. But our primary goal is to enable the women and girls of Afghanistan to get an education through virtual means at the moment, but our organization did begin during the first reign of the Taliban in the late 1990s. And we are a group of Canadians who care deeply about the future of this current generation of Afghan women in particular, whose lives have been dramatically changed since the return of the Taliban in 2021. Leave it at that for now.
Thanks, Catherine. Clearly an issue of great passion for you and I suspect for many of us around the fire. Patrick, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Colleen, for getting us started in such a powerful way. I think reflecting on and acknowledging the lens in which we work is such an important part of even volunteerism. And I acknowledge with respect the traditional territories of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, like Catherine. I'm also calling out from the lands of the, Sianyu, the Songhees, and the First Nations whose land I live and work on. Otherwise known as Victoria on Vancouver Island. I recognize, I think, the land as firstly a source of wealth, a source of freedom, a source of health. My personal journey originally from Zimbabwe in Southern Africa, is, the value of the land, whether it's through birth ceremonies or family celebrations that are anchored, by the land as a source of well-being. I acknowledge also the different communities that I've worked with, that I continue to work with across Africa and beyond. Again, recognizing certainly that, land is important, and coming, in the past couple of weeks, learning a few things happening on the international front, right? That there still needs to be a continued dialogue and learning from which we seek to reconcile, to respect and honor the land in which we all work. I certainly hold the view that land cannot be called crappy land. Land is a source of wealth. Land is a source of freedom. Land is a source of health and connection with culture. And we need to respect and honor the different lands and territories that we work upon. So thank you, Colleen, for holding space for us and allowing us to start this way. In international development, as well as in voluntarism, there are values that guide and perhaps inform the work that we do. And there are so many principles and values that are spoken about in international development. And so we speak about decolonization, intercultural and intracultural ethics, solidarity. In grant making, they speak of trust-based approaches, trust-based philanthropy, which is a new buzzword. And we want to go beyond, in this conversation today, hopefully go beyond buzzwords. There's shared language, there are power relationships, there's respect and localization. I know Andrea was talking a little bit more about respect and what that means. And so perhaps as a first question to our panelists today, what principles or values do you think should guide relationships amongst communities, nonprofit organizations, and volunteers? And even as you think about that, do these values or perhaps principles differ if the volunteer is outside their home country and when they are inside? And so, interested maybe perhaps to start off with that question: what principles, what values should guide relationships among communities, nonprofits, as well as volunteers? Maybe Andrea, would you be willing to start us off?
Yes, thank you, Patrick. And it is so important to have some guidelines, but first I would like to remember all of us that it's very important to acknowledge that each context is so different. And I will invite you to please remember that every time I open my mouth, because sometimes we use certain terms that might look like we are generalizing, but just remembering each other that each context is very, very, very different. And again, I'm sharing here the learnings, the sharings, the ancestral knowledges that have been shared with me within the framework of this collaborative work with the Ashenic and Yine peoples from the Peruvian Amazon. So just to kind of give a little bit of a sense of like this very important thing about context. So for instance, in Peru, there are about 50 recognized, and I'm not going to go into the conversation about the nations that are not recognized, but about 50 different nations that have been recognized in Peru, each one having their own language. So if we are going to focus just in the Asheninka people, which is one of the nations that we are working with, they have about 125 different communities. And in the conversations with the Asheninka co-researchers, because in our pluricultural research team, we are working with Asheninka and Yine co-researchers, we learn that each community, and this is in our visits, each community have their own particular context. So context is very specific, it's dynamic, it's fluid. And of course, that totally makes sense because we are talking about living realities. So addressing the thing about, or the issue or the aspect about principles, And values, yes, they might vary, they might change, and especially the prioritization of them might change according to the context. And in our work, after the conversations for over a decade with community members, we identified 7 principles that could contribute to having to what we are calling intercultural respectful interactions. And why intercultural respectful interactions? We are talking about intercultural respect, considering that the terms of respect are not just going to be one directional, but multi-directional. So we are considering different perspectives of what respect means for each context. So in this particular context with Amazonian indigenous peoples, we have been considering as well a historical justice approach. So meaning that we are considering not just current situations, but historical situations. And I'm going to share with you 7 principles, but please, Brianne will help me to share some links where you can find in more depth what I'm talking about. I'm just going to go quickly through the 7 principles that were prioritized by community members in our work. So that community members identified that are very important in order to have an intercultural, respectful relationship or interaction is what in Spanish could be called cariño, or loosely translated as love. It could also be translated as amor, like love. And it is like cariño or love toward indigenous peoples. And according to community members, this is the main engine, the main motivator of any type of work. And also Brianne is going to share with you this material, this book, in which a number of indigenous leaders also are sharing with all of us their principles or their guidelines to have a decolonizing and indigenizing relationship. Love should be in the background of any type of effort, any type of interaction. And they made this very clear because it shouldn't be power. It shouldn't be professional or private interest. It shouldn't be money. It shouldn't be recognition of any sort. What is behind the interaction in the process of working or interacting with indigenous peoples. So community members identified that as the first principle, value to interact with them in any type of action of any type of action with them. So the second one, it will be compliance with the recognition of the indigenous structures and protocols. So each community have their own internal respective protocols. In the particular context of Amazonian indigenous peoples, this looks like first going to the Indigenous Amazonian Federation, which is a body that mediates outsiders with indigenous realities, interactions, to ask for permission. And they are very clear into talking about asking for permission to enter to indigenous self-determined territories. And this is just the first step, because there are other steps in which once we have this document that is kind of type of a visa, that after the Federation officials have listened, what are our purposes? What are we planning to do in indigenous territories? They can issue that visa, and with that visa, we go to communities and then follow another processes with the community authorities. And this is something that is definitely not recognized, since Peru is seen as a country, and as soon as we arrive to Peru, we have the assumption that we are open to go anywhere without knowing that there are self-determined indigenous territories in which you cannot access without a permission. Unfortunately, there have been situations in which community members have been proceed according to their rules, their intern ethic and respectful protocols to expel people. So just to consider that's very important, and something the community member ask to have very clear. Please ask for permission before entering to communities. So the third principle that were recognized by community members is centering the indigenous knowledges, sciences, wisdoms, and intellect. Then, and you can go through all of these through the link that Brian will share with us. I'm just going to go very quickly through them. Then flexibility and adaptation to the community agendas, spaces, time, and languages. Another very important aspect that it was mentioned before is listening. Then facilitating the community members' own processes to understand their views. And for instance, will imply this asking rather than telling what to do. And the last one will be recognizing with words and actions that community members and the federation officials, and just to remind us, the federations are the self-government bodies that are recognized by the indigenous communities in the Peruvian Amazon as the mediators between outsiders and indigenous peoples. So recognizing that they are the experts of their own realities. And this is very important because sometimes from outside we think that we know what they need and what they want. So just to finish, like the last aspect that I would like to remind us is that it's very important to rethink and critically analyze certain concepts and practices, such as so-called development, help, poor, what sustainability means, what consultation is, and these are just a few words among others that are commonly used in a very non-contextualized way, which perpetuates colonization and violence. And I'm super happy to share about them later in the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Andrea, for that lovely summation. I really enjoyed you sort of spotlighting context, culture, and community, right? And even just, recognizing that context is dynamic and fluid. And I also just loved listening to you speak about these 7 sort of intercultural principles that you've written on. Deanna, I'd like to come to you. Do you have sort of any additional insights as well that you would love to share with us?
Yeah, particularly exploring one sort of principle or practice. And I mean, when we're talking about international development, we don't hear it very often. And when we do, for me, sometimes it's questionable whether it's used correctly, but that term is a term that we use every day at CODEV, and that's solidarity. And it's so important, in fact, and I mentioned this to Brianne before, it's so important to us that, in Spanish, we use it a lot. We have the word in Spanish, solidario, solidaria. In English, we don't have it. I keep saying we should push to use solidaritas in our daily speech. But so this for me is crucial, because I think if we're talking about a local context or an international context, it should be solidarity that guides our relationships between people and between organizations. Like if we want to be serious about affecting systemic or structural change, if we want to, help engender an emancipatory social, political, and economic transformation, we need to understand what solidarity is and to strive for it and practice it. So solidarity, and I mean, you can see many different definitions online, but I think the way I understand it is the practice of unifying struggles, sharing in struggle, sharing in the labor, in the work that needs to be done, and to build something better together. It implies a more horizontalist relationship, and seeks to kind of break down that hierarchy that I think is very much still deeply embedded in the way international development is practiced and perceived in Canada, at least. And I actually sent this to Brianne in writing, I believe, but that I see solidarity as subversive. Like, solidarity needs to threaten power. If it's not, if governments and businesses are not shaking in their boots, then we're not doing it right. So solidarity is about building a movement, is resisting solidarity's long-term commitment. So it's not something that should be seen as a trend, you know, we're in it today and then we're out of it tomorrow. And solidarity is liberation for all, right? Not just for a few. And so this is regardless of our geographic location. So to answer your question, it shouldn't matter whether we are abroad or at home.
Okay.
That we should be consistent, otherwise it's hollow. And so so I say that, you know, we can strive for this, or we can, whether intentionally or not, reinforce colonial, capitalist, patriarchal, and racist structures and social relations. So I don't want to offend people in saying what I'm going to say, but charity as a voluntary act of outward benevolence carried out on the whim of the charitable party is an enabler of colonialism, right? And capitalism. So it reinforces inequity, right? By reinforcing the hierarchy. So there's someone who has and someone who has not. How much is given is decided by the person who has. When they give is decided by the person who has. And it keeps people in the so-called global South dependent, subservient, and tries to keep them non-threatening. So I'm just going to give an example to kind of differentiate between how we can go about our work in what we're calling international development. So we can go the charitable route or the solidaritist route. So there is, I won't name names, but there is a North American manufacturer. And for decades, they've refused to prioritize the health and safety of their sweatshop workers, of the workers of their assembly for export plants in the so-called global South. So they maintain long work hours, impose unreasonably high production targets that devastate the bodies of these primarily women workers. So within 10, 15 years, they're churning them out because their bodies are now prematurely aged and disabled. So these women have organized and they're demanding their health and safety, and then, you know, their human rights and their labor rights, and they're demanding dignified working conditions. And this company, rather than invest in the health and safe work conditions, they opt to give, say, I don't know, $500,000 to a charity of its choice that's a player in the international development field, with the purpose of empowering women workers in these plants. Empowering, whatever that means, empowering. So that's charity. And this is the making of underdevelopment. This is the making of poverty, right? And that can be seen, people can call that international development, right? You're giving money to a charity, and this charity's, you know, doing some workshops in this global South country, and that's development, apparently. Now, solidarity, one example would be workers in North America putting pressure on the Canadian company to address the demands of its workers, whether it's by writing letters, hosting, hosting actions, doing educational seminars and tours, and really, trying to publicize the actions of this company. Solidarity is workers in Canada pressing for stronger policy and enforcement of this policy around harmful business practices conducted by Canadian businesses. And solidarity is workers here engaging and exchanging with workers in the so-called global South, sharing knowledge with one another, exchanging, strategies and tactics, sharing their analyses. And these workers go on knowing that they have allies around the world, partners around the world, build up on their own accord in the vision that they see and that they want, and fight for economic equity. That's solidarity. And so that's our route at CODEV. I know wells are very important, but we don't build wells, and we don't give goats. Those are also very important, but we don't engage in that sort of work. We acknowledge that we're not experts. Our partners are in Latin America, and we try to honor that and try to hold ourselves accountable being here in Canada. So so in terms of like principles and values, I think, solidarity should be central. And I think we should very much kind of question the usage of terms, but more so the application and the, So I'll leave it there because I felt like I took a lot of space, but we'll move on.
No, you did not. I mean, that's amazing, Deanna, just being able to sort of ground us, right, with this, sort of the notion of terminology, right? And as you were speaking, I thought of a story. So, we're gathered around the fire as we are, and so maybe I should tell a short story. My kids laugh at me and my stories, but I hope the audience will appreciate my stories. So, I remember, my grandmother telling me this story too, right? That, there was an elephant and a mouse, and they were very good friends, very, very good friends. And they used to play together, do stuff together. And so one day, they just, said, hey, let's have a party. And so mouse invited the elephant, say, hey, let's go out and have a party. So invited all of their friends and, started having a party. Yeah, dancing around. An hour later into that party, Elephant was now starting to look for his friend Mouse. What happened to Mouse? Mouse, what happened? And the elephant looked down at his feet, and there, crumpled and trampled and bloody, was the mouse, right? The intention was to have a party and to have fun and to enjoy, but his friend, the mouse, had suddenly, sort of been trampled. And the point of the story there was that while Elephant did not mean to do harm, he didn't understand the effects he was having on the mouse, right? And so it's almost like the company that you were talking about, right? That, you're coming in and saying, okay, we're going to cut out a check, but there's a broader effect, that is happening there. And so it also makes me think about the notion of volunteerism and going out there. Sometimes when we leave the global north to go to the global south and volunteer, the intention really is not to do harm, right? But in traveling to the other side of the world, they can be, as you mentioned, wells are not a bad idea. They're important things, but there can be, sort of dangerous side effects of some of these volunteer trips. Sometimes it's possible that folks don't recognize that, playing a savior or a Santa Claus is highly disempowering, and sometimes very belittling to those they feel that they're assisting. And so despite sort of good intentions that might exist, sometimes we perpetuate as volunteers perhaps an unhealthy dynamic where the benevolent or rich foreign is a savior and the materially poor person is helpless. And so I'm interested to know, just from the panelists, and any of you can jump in if you feel moved to do so. Relationships, particularly, power relationships, are very important to consider when looking at volunteers who partner with organizations in the global South. I'm interested and curious to know what programs or projects that incorporate volunteers are successful. What do the relationships look like in these programs? Whether it's programs that are happening in the Amazon, Andrea, or it's programs that CODEV is leading, or Catherine, with the work that you've been doing. What do the relationships look like when working in the global South? Anyone feel free to. Oh, Catherine, please go ahead.
Sure, I'll just say that we work under the direction of other Afghan women leaders, both in Afghanistan as well as in the diaspora, and take our lead from what it is that they want to be prioritized, with the focus on education. Our programs are available to them in their languages. We have a digital library that provides them with learning materials in Dari and Pashto. And yeah, I guess it's those types of initiatives that you know, we are taking our lead from them in terms of what they want to prioritize. Now, you know, I recognize that I'm speaking as a white settler in Canada. We certainly, you know, I've been involved in coordinating letter writing campaigns to our members of parliament, and we organize rallies, and whenever possible, we invite Afghan speakers to come and join our community and respectfully learn from them.
Yeah.
Being mindful that there is that hierarchy, and that we are working to, as Deanna says, I liked her comment about you know, avoiding the harmful practices of this power dynamic. I want to learn from others as much as raise awareness about the lack of inequality in our world, and be there for the long term. So I'll leave it at that. I'm not sure if that even answered your question, Patrick, but hopefully
It did.
touched
Yeah.
on some things.
It did, Catherine, and I'm beginning, to draw a link too, that, Andrea started off with respect, and you're drawing that connection too with the issue of respectfully learning, right? That it's just not a one way, right? That even as we go out to these different countries, or in your experience working with women in Afghanistan, that it's two ways, right? It's learning and also being able to share what you have. I'm curious, Andrea, Diana, in terms of approaches to relationships, what has worked, what have you seen working, if any, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think with us at CODEV, like we have volunteers, but we don't have like the volunteer program isn't necessarily the core of our work. Like we work primarily to facilitate partnerships between organizations here and in Latin America. And I think for us, the relationships that we've had most experience with and have seen really bear beautiful fruit is that of the partnerships. So when when I say we facilitate relationships or partnerships between people here and in Latin America, that involves, organizing delegations of folks in Canada to visit their counterparts in Latin America and exchange with them. And as I said, share information and strategies and tactics and see how they can link and unify their struggles. And likewise, organizing delegations to invite our Latin American partners to Canada to interact and meet with workers from different unions or other organizations. And I think that worker to worker, more horizontalist approach has helped to build kind of a very long-term. We have some partnerships that are as old as our organization, 39 years.
Wow.
So these are long-standing. There's a long-term commitment. So again, I want to reiterate that like flying in for, a 3-month, experience and take all your Instagram photos and then leaving when it's convenient and then never following up. I think, that's just maybe a very crude example of what could happen if we approach volunteering or volunteerism from a non-solidarist perspective or approach. That I think is harmful, as you stated, Patrick. You gave some examples, but definitely I think kind of a positive, meaningful, transformative impact on movement building, on not only the communities in which these projects are based, but Canadian policy. Those are all things that I think would say, okay, we're doing something right in our organization. Like, I think numbers alone don't reveal anything. You can have 100 volunteers in your program, but if the work isn't meaningful or leading to any, social transformation, then that's just a waste of their time.
Thanks so much for sharing, and welcome to our panelist, Chris, who's calling in from Zambia. Chris, can you hear us fine?
Yes, I'm getting you very clearly.
Oh, fantastic. Welcome, and good evening to you.
Thank you so much. Good morning to you.
Thank you. Chris, you'll pick up our conversation as we move forward, and we'll bring you in. And thanks to Catherine and Diana for providing those reflections. And it made me think about values. And so, Colleen, what do you see as a real value when approaching communities? I know in your introduction you mentioned some work that you do with the Maasai community in Tanzania. So I'm interested to know from you, what do you see as a real value when approaching communities?
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Chris.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, Chris, please. We'd love to hear from you, and we're so happy to have you with us. So please, if you're ready to jump in, please jump in. We just to let you know, we've created this image of us sitting all around a fire. So I guess I shouldn't be asking you to jump in. I should be asking you to lean forward.
Yeah.
The values in the communities are actually so many, and that which they value most is their norms. Their norms cannot just be changed by anybody visiting them. They have lived over years and decades and centuries with the same norms, the cultural values that unite them. The respect amongst them, the respect for mothers, the respect for females, the respect for elders, the respect for chiefs. Those are values that they actually uphold. Their traditions are very important. When you look at their ceremonies, those are things, and their beliefs. What do they believe in? What are they looking for in order to survive as human beings in that particular community? Definitely, these are some of the values. I can simply jump in while allowing others to continue talking.
Thank you very much for that response, Chris. And Colleen?
Let me add this comment, and then I'm going to jump into our third question. I've been volunteering now in Maasailand in the Makuni Maasai community for about 6 years, and I think the single most important value that I've learned from our executive director, from my friend, from my colleague Clamian, is the importance of doing things pole, doing them slowly, doing them thoughtfully, doing them carefully. I'm a type A, jump in and do it. And the thing that he has taught me over and over and over again is that it's worth taking the time to think it through, to talk to everybody around the circle, to get everybody's impression, to work to come to a collaborative understanding of the situation. It's an incredibly powerful lesson for me. And I would pass that on, and that language of pole, do it slowly, do it carefully, to anybody who wants to grab onto that. Pole is spelled P-O-L-E. That was also a
Yes.
big issue for us at one point. How do you write that? Yeah.
Gotcha.
Because we come from, we need to write things down world.
Yeah.
So Catherine, I want to turn to you and ask this question in the context of the depth of experience you've had in volunteering and participating with Women for Women in Afghanistan, and ask the question of what should folks be asking themselves? What should they be considering? What should they be looking for as they start, or even before they start looking for opportunities as a volunteer?
Well, thank you, Colleen. I think what Andrea and Deanna have shared, and Chris as well, and Patrick and you, is this notion of partnership. And I think that for me personally, it's a question of, what ignites a fire in my belly? What's meaningful to me and why? And within those parameters, looking at, being mindful of potential power dynamics and pitfalls. We're all human. We all make mistakes. That's how we learn and grow. So I suppose the first thing I'd say is don't be afraid. Try things out, network with others, do your research, look on websites, and you look for things like mission statements and financial transparency and the outcomes and the collaborative partnerships. What are the core values that an organization represents that aligns with your personal desire to become involved and to be a partner in this change making? It is a long-term commitment. Not everyone has the ability to commit on a long-term basis, and maybe the first organization you try just isn't the right fit. So give yourself time to settle in and listen to others and be attentive to your own assumptions and mindful of being respectful and questioning. These are all the types of things that I think of when I think about what I've learned over the course of the length of time that I've been with the organization. And have some fun too, brainstorm. Listen to others, listen to yourself, and try not to take yourself too seriously. That's one of the things that I'm very guilty of, but I keep working at it. And I do learn and grow through this experience, and I'm so grateful for it. Whether our actions are making a difference is sometimes hard to know, but I think we have to have faith. We have to have faith in the goodness of humanity to care about each other and to want to make it a more just world. So perhaps I'll leave it there.
One of the things that happened for me as you were speaking, Catherine, is I heard you talk about do your research and listen and ask questions and check the websites. And then I also heard you talk about laughing and having some fun. And it reminded me about my yoga classes where people talk about making your whole self present, having your whole body and your whole mind and your whole person present. And I think that's what I got. That's the really key message I got from what you said is go all in. Once you found the fit, go all in.
Yeah, that's very much the case. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Andrea, I think you wanted to add something to this piece of the conversation, and I know Brianne, that we're supposed to get to the question and answer, so we're all there, but let's just hear what Andrea might have to say to what people need to be thinking about.
Thank you so much, Catherine, for what you said, because that's very important. I think that's the wisdom that sometimes we need to remember, because we tend to take things very seriously. We are like, we want to do this thing, and it's like we want to do it. And remembering the importance of enjoying as well is very wise. So thank you so much, Catherine, for sharing that. I will add to what you said that from our experience, it's so important to be invited. And I would repeat it again, being invited. And otherwise, if we are not being invited, is asking first if the support that we intend to offering is required by the peoples themselves. And in this particular topic, in this particular detail, I'm talking about the peoples and not the representatives of government officials, but the peoples themselves. And if so, it's just to be aware under whose terms this support will happen, because the terms should not be only on the outsider's terms. So I would like to invite all of us to remember, if we are intending to have to extend that support to somebody else or to peoples, in let's call it volunteering, these supports, that it was mentioned before, it could be very much disempowering. That's the potential. It could be very empowering or very much disempowering. And one of the terms that I was raising at the beginning of what I was saying is like a number of practices and concepts that we might be able, it would be good to rethink. One of them is helping. And helping has been in the forefront in the face of the colonizing discourses and practices, not just now, but historically, and dispossessing indigenous peoples from their territories. And we know that without territories, there is impoverishment, and with impoverishment is generation of further harm. And please don't take me wrong, I know that many peoples, like my people, we have been facing colonization for a lot of time. There is impoverishment. It could be a lot of already the internalized, colonized mind. And with you, I will just to share some of the testimonies of the peoples that I've been working with that completely challenge, and it challenged myself, you know, as sometimes we go with the good intentions to support someone else with our own assumptions, and then we are challenged completely, and our brain just breaks into a number of pieces because of what we hear from them. And these disempowering discourses come not just in words, but come in actions through policies, laws, projects, programs. And we need to be very aware that they sometimes push the colonial project. So this is a testimony I would like to share with you, which echoes many of the testimonies that I've heard firsthand from community members in these parts of the central Peruvian Amazon. And quote here, one of the community members was asking me, Andrea, why people call us poor? Why are we pushed to live in cities? We know that in cities we will become poor because the water of the rivers are already polluted. We cannot drink that water. We cannot fish there anymore. Everything is covered in cement, and we cannot grow our own food. There is no more forest to hunt and the forest to provide us with medicine. We are not poor, but we will become poor if we go to the city. So this community member was encouraged us to rethink about that. And he continues in saying, like, we just want our forest to be healthy. And we want people of the cities to leave us alone. And we will go to the cities if we need to. For instance, this community member was saying, like, we want to sell our produce. We just want our produce to be sold and purchased with a fair price. But please, and he continued, we want to be in peace. Leave us alone. That completely break my mind in many ways, because from outside, there is this assumption that, you know, under certain indicators, they are being seen as underdeveloped, poor, in necessity. But then when we listen, and that's one of the principles that it was mentioned before, listening and asking for permission, hearing first, if we are intending to go somewhere else to support, it is very important to support their own struggles, their own objectives, support their own agendas. And just to finalize, so in our particular conversation with Ashenica and Guinea peoples, we learned that it's very important to first be very clear about what our own purposes and motivations. And if we identified that our purposes are having the background as the engine, cariño or love, that's the cariño is the Spanish term, or love, or intercultural respect, like this intercultural understanding, not just from one side, but multi-directional side of what respect means. We have some type of longing for justice and a commitment to sharing power and decision-making in the process, not just in one aspect, but in all aspects. We might be in a road of working in an informed, decolonizing, and indigenizing aspiration. And if so, there is the possibility that we have been truly contributing to these self-determined aspirations and agendas of the particular peoples that we are aspiring to contribute with. So that's kind of our learning, my breaking brain, because of, even though we want to not to make any assumption, we are making many assumptions, and I particularly find very like a huge curving learn through listening people and incorporating that in the decision making. I will leave it there. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Andrea. Andrea, you're turning the heat up. You really are turning the heat up. I mean, you know, when you speak about justice, we are not poor. We have this perspective, right? Listen to us, learn from us. Let's co-develop. Let's work together. I think those are important aspects to understand, particularly for those that are, you know, in the global north and looking at opportunities to go out and volunteer. And even as you were speaking, you know, I just couldn't stop but take, you know, copious amounts of notes around, you know, what you're saying. But even that, just made a note to self again, to revisit this notion of the lexicons, the words, the terminology that is used in the global north. For a long time, I battled with this notion of capacity building, right? And I would hear folks from the, you know, global north saying, yeah, we're going to go out on a capacity building trip, or in fact, we're not going to give you any funding if you don't have a budget line for capacity building, because we feel we need capacity building. And capacity building, right? Because for me, it was an assumption that there's ground zero, there's nothing, there's no capacity, that a local community has absolutely zero capacity to take themselves out of, you know, the particular issue that they are in. And I found, and I took umbrage to that. I thought, wow, no. I would rather use capacity development, perhaps, because, hey, I learn from you, you learn from me, and then together we co-develop and we co-create a pathways forward that is helpful to advance us forward. So Andrea, I'll blame you if we go over time, because you've really been turning up the heat and really giving us so good perspectives, right? That we can reflect on as we go. But maybe enough of us. Let's just turn it back maybe to the audience and see if we've got some questions in the chat. Colleen, are there any that you see there? Let me see. Yes. There's a question there. So to the panelists, is developing a critical consciousness and awareness of our positionality enough to avoid the pitfalls of reinforcing the global systems of oppression and inequality? So knowing gender, race, class, ethnicity, our abilities or inabilities, or geographical locations as part of positionality, is that enough to avoid the pitfalls? I see, Diana, you're going, I'll pass on the topic. Oh, Chris, do you want to come in first before Diana comes in? Go ahead, Chris.
Maybe Diana can go first.
Okay.
Okay, sure.
All
Yeah,
right.
no. Answer for me personally, I think no. I think it's good. You need to have critical consciousness as a base, right? Because that's knowledge, that's awareness, and but you have to do, right? And you have to do the work, to dismantle the oppressive structures, right? And that's hard work. We've got to organize and mobilize. So yeah, because it just doesn't. We don't just will equity and liberation to existence. So yeah, my answer is no. Got to do the work.
Okay. Awesome. I could see you shaking. No. Great. So no, you got to do the work. Chris, your thoughts?
Yes, I was thinking of it in this way, that there is what they call advocacy. Advocacy goes with the majority. And for you to do a lot of social change, you need to be together as a movement in the whole world. The unit of purpose, the direction and the focus of what you really want to change in the world. If it's something like to decolonize ourselves mentally, it is something that everybody should unite and work towards that, and then develop an advocacy strategy that the world will understand, even at the UN, even at local countries, our own governments, our own elders, our own leaders around, the young people, building that capacity. Not building capacity. Patrick will get very close. Just to add on what they know already, that things are hot around them. So we need to push forward together. And that's what Videa does. In Videa, we work together as a team. We don't leave anyone behind, and we are very sure that everybody knows something. And that's something we can utilize. So we need a unit of purpose to come together as a force that will change things. Social change is actually very, very difficult sometimes to succeed in. To get it. So we need that force. Thank you so much. Maybe others can pick it up from there.
Thanks, Chris. And I again pick up from unit of purpose, decolonizing mentally, unity in action. So again, solidarity, the theme of solidarity coming through again. So yeah, Andrea, Catherine, do you have any thoughts around this awareness? Should does it help? Is it enough to avoid the reinforcement of the global systems of oppression?
In and of itself, I agree with Deanna. No, it's not enough. We have to do the work. It does involve a lot of challenging our own assumptions, thinking about the language that we use. And it doesn't happen overnight. We do have to be vigilant, I suppose, and keep the notion of solidarity, as we've talked about, and the notion of respect and love alive in the work that we do, and to be willing to compromise and learn from our mistakes, I think, is certainly part of it for me. I'm just looking at the other question there and wondering if I can just touch briefly on that.
Touch on it. Yeah.
Yeah, although, you know, the others may have more they want to say about the first question, but I think looking at what an organization's outcomes are is important to evaluate. I agree that a lot of websites do use the same buzzwords, and of course it can be very overwhelming to determine. I think that's also where the experimentation comes in, and getting involved and taking time to settle in and learn. You know, none of us have all the time in the world, but I think it's it is important to begin somewhere and try things out, and look at what accomplishments are being, you know, what efforts are being made to work toward the shared goals of the people involved. I could say a lot more, but I think I'll try to keep my comments brief. Perhaps those are all, you know, very obvious points, but it's what's coming to mind for me now.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Catherine, for that insightful response. I'm just checking with the panelists here if there's anyone who wants to add anything there before we move to the next question. The question really was just around how do you determine that, you know, the organizations you want to, you know, go and volunteer for, how do you determine that they're really practicing principles of, you know, whether it's feminism, it's decolonization, or it's, you know, equitable power dynamics, or is it they're just using that terminology to sell themselves? So if anyone wants to take a dig at that. Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think Catherine answered that really well. I want to add, you know, you can find out where do they get their money from. So who's funding them, right? Like what projects are they supporting? There are a lot of international development NGOs. For some people who are opposed to, say, mining, right, Canadian extractive practices, you can find out that there are some that have partnered with mining companies, and you know, you can do your homework, because it might be in a news article, so do your research, and look at the projects they're supporting. You know, does it sound really band-aid, like band-aidy, like a band-aid solution? Are they trying to go you know, and dig at the root of you know, of so-called underdevelopment? I think it's important for organizations to really name power, like name the cause of the so-called impoverishment or the underdevelopment. And so, you know, it's important to see if an organization is actually making the link between, you know, colonialism, capitalism, patriarchy, making the link between structures and systems with conditions, then okay, they're somewhere, right? And you can dig deeper. But I think, yeah, it can be tough, because I see decolonization everywhere these days. All levels of government are using it, and that kind of sometimes rings hollow, as this past week has shown. So yeah, definitely, you know, those words can sometimes indicate reality, but sometimes, yeah, not. So that was a great question.
So thanks.
It's important to go beyond discourse, and that's something that I've been kind of absorbing, not just through what others have been sharing, but we can be so good with our words, but then there is a huge gap with the practice of it. So the discourses in our work, we have been using those discourses in order to be able in a system to give the fundaments, the arguments, why are we doing certain things? So besides, you know, like asking and inquiring where those funds are coming from, what are the objectives of the organizations, and whether they are pursuing more emancipatory and community-led objectives and agendas, or otherwise following and pushing the colonial project. also where the funding is coming from. Is there any objective that is being is going to interject, is going to create problems in the pursuit of truly pursuing communities' agendas or the peoples that you want to support agendas? Having that in mind and speaking about that and making those words actually being applicable would also support a more meaningful way of supporting people.
Fantastic. Thanks, Andrea, for that contribution as well. It makes me think about the different experiences that each of you as panelists have had. And so we are approaching almost the end of our conversation. Our fire, the embers are starting to die down a bit. But before the fire completely dozes off, I would love to hear from you. If you could just share a personal, perhaps we can start off with Chris, if you're okay. Just share a personal or even organizational experience that highlights the transformative power of volunteering. And as you think about it, what sort of elements or conditions has made this sort of experience transformational?
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. I think the whole purpose and the targeting of whatever we do is to make a change for better.
Yeah.
If we are changing someone's life to be different, and this has been that has been experienced in organizations that we partner with in the global south, and Canada in particular. If you look at the vibrancy of the volunteers at international level, you find that a number of volunteers that came into the country as introverts get back home as extroverts, meaning they have now started mixing with people and they can talk. They were quiet when they were in their own country, but they're able to. This I've seen. It's a reality. It's not something that I can just talk about. Those that had addiction problems, after staying with us for close to 3 months and looking at the advantages of being out of addiction, they go back slightly better than they came. Those that lose hope in education while back at home, home in Canada, when they see their own friends and the colleagues that are struggling to get education in a difficult way, they get back home in Canada and start school. We have experiences of this. That is a transformative way of which our interns go through. Also that others who promise to start respecting elders actually see it for themselves when they see young people respecting elders, giving way to elders even on the bus, giving way to elders or kneeling when the elders are passing. They get to the norms and say, okay, let's compare. What do we do back home? We just shout at anyone. We just say anything against an elderly person. So they learn a lot of things. Like sharing information, I've seen big changes in terms of upgrading of websites in organizations where these young people work. They change, they even develop new work culture, which has never been there in the countries of their origin. They do a lot of artistic activities. They do a lot of sharing of information. They also develop the spirit of kindness towards each other. Kindness is not just easy to do on another person, but in Vidia, we actually work towards making everybody be kind to another person. And not only to their own relations, but to everyone. Culturally, we are supposed to be human beings that should know that this next person I've met who is talking is a human being. This person is not barking, is talking, so is a human being. So we have a lot of change in traumatized young people. Those that are traumatized, when they hear stories of others being raped back here, they say, oh yeah, let's compare our situation with this. This is actually worse. than what we are going through back home. So they go back with another level of strength. For me, that is transformational. Also, that they become helpful in society. When they go back, they actually, some of them even say, now I'm going to start community meetings when I get back. Also to see that when they're actually volunteering, they are a center of all eyes. Look at the community are looking at them. The government of the Republic of Canada is looking at them. The parents are also looking at them. Their own chiefs, their own elders around are looking at their behavior. So the behavioral change that we see in the young people when they are here tells us that the youth have actually changed. That is what I've seen by my 38 years of working with the young people in this country. 8 years of working with young people is so large a period for me. And I've seen it from school time when I was actually an academician teaching the young people in secondary schools, also growing up with them into NGO world, and also in community work. That part of my training, I actually got it from Canada at Antigonish at that is St. Francis Coding Institute. I learned a lot in terms of looking at the young ones. These are psychological issues that we must also value and attain in order to make sure our young people be better citizens in the future. Thank you. Over talking.
Thank you very much. That's the educator in you, right? And so it's not over talking, but it's really sharing and oozing out from the over 38 years of experience that you've had. And so we appreciate, we honor you, and we love you. And so thank you so much for sharing that. Deanna, did you have a perspective you would want to share in terms of just the experiences? What has been transformational for you?
Yeah, the transformative power of volunteering. And again, I'll go back to, the transformative power of the solidarity partnerships, because I think that's what we work through mostly at CODAV, is like some tangible examples. And this is years of work that people in Canada and Latin America have been doing together has resulted in some pretty big gains, pretty big wins. And I just wanted to share some of those with you today. So we have teachers in Canada linking up with teachers in different parts of Latin America, primarily Central America. And with that decades-long solidarity relationship we've had, now teachers have pushed for non-sexist and inclusive pedagogy included in the curricula in their countries. So that is something that from the ground up, that was achieved by these teachers in Latin America. And teachers here saw the value of that. And so that's one example. Another is in healthcare. In Central America, we have health promoters that have long been battling privatization of public health, the public healthcare system, and really politicizing that struggle. And healthcare workers here have for maybe 33 years have been supporting that project and have been going on delegations and have been exchanging with one another and learning from one another on, the best ways to, keep the public healthcare system public. And so these are struggles that are here in Canada and in Latin America. And so these are examples we've seen community health promoters in El Salvador, for instance, accessing decision-making spaces or over the past several years to expand the system and access. And just one more, we have workers across Canada who support human rights defenders in Colombia, for instance. And there is the intercultural, or the University of the Peoples, trains new generations of social leaders from Indigenous, Afro-descendant, and peasant communities, and they're trained by people from those very communities. And one of the alumni from that very grassroots institution is the Vice President of Colombia, Francia Marquez, herself a social leader. So we see that we see these processes that are decades long, if not more, you know, unfolding and going on through the work of partnership. And so that's just still, I'm just giving some examples. And so, yeah, so I'll leave it at that, just to give you some takeaways from our end at CODEF.
Wow. Thank you so much for those takeaways, right? Just expansion, looking at, the benefits that come through expansion of systems and access, and the work that's been done by sort of human rights defenders, and even just the leadership that comes out of this, right? And so thank you so much for sharing that. And indeed, thank you to our panelists as our time, draws to a close. I've got a difficult task, which is to try and just capture and summarize our conversations today, but I'll try. I've been taking notes, and I hope that I'll do a little bit of justice. And so I think the key themes that I managed to pull out of our conversation are solidarity, listening, and respect. Is some of the key important things that come through. And as we've all heard from our esteemed panelists, volunteering goes beyond the act of giving time. It's actually about building communities, about fostering empathy, as well as creating positive change. And I think our panelists did a great job speaking into those. Volunteers, again, perhaps should adhere to these principles of integrity and respect and accountability. Certainly upholding confidentiality and promoting inclusivity is important, right? As well as ensuring that there's transparency in their actions, as well as the observance of critical, ethical values that I know Andrea was speaking so much to as well. So, friends, colleagues, I urge us, let us sort of carry the insights and inspiration for our conversation today forward into our lives, into our workplaces, into our communities. Each of us has the capacity to make a difference. And by embracing the spirit of volunteerism, I think we can contribute not only to the betterment of others and society, but certainly shape a bright future. So to the colleagues, panelists, I want to, on behalf of my co-host, Colleen, thank you so much for your insights. Thank you for to the engaged audience, and to everyone who dedicates their time and energy to making a positive impact. Let's continue to inspire and be inspired by the incredible potential that lies within volunteer work, within volunteerism. Together, we can be the change we wish to see in the world. And so, colleagues, thank you so much for joining us today. Have a great afternoon, great evening, or great morning, depending on where you are in the world, and enjoy the rest of the week. Thank you.
Thank you so much to everyone.